Hey everybody, I'm Scott Weichel. You're listening to My Kind of Country right here on Fish Creek Radio with our very special tribute to Lefty Frizzell. It's always a pleasure to talk to this gentleman. I've gotten to know him very well over the last couple of years, and he's been on the show before. And he is the nephew of Lefty Frizzell, and he's a mighty fine singer in his own right, and a fantastic guy and a great guy to talk to tell some stories about Lefty. And we're going to talk a little bit about his career too. But would you welcome Jimmy Clay Frizzell to My Kind of Country? Jimmy, how are you tonight?
Man, I'm doing all right. How's it going up there, Scott?
Hey, we're cold, but we're hanging in there, you know.
No, same here. Absolutely, absolutely. Glad to be on the show as always. It's always a pleasure to hear from you, see what's going on and what's happening. And Lefty's, he's my favorite anyway. I don't mind talking about Lefty at all.
That's great. Jimmy, tell me how you're related to Lefty.
Yeah, well, actually, it comes from my mom's side. My mom is Lefty's little sister. She's the youngest sister. There was 3 sisters and 5 boys. Mom, David, and Alan were the last 3, the youngest, and Lefty being the oldest, and then all the boys and girls in between. That kind of a deal.
Yeah. Well, Jimmy, tell me your first memories of Lefty Frizzell and realizing that he wasn't just Uncle Sonny, that he was a big star. When did you kind of come to that realization?
Yeah, that's a good question. As far as the first part of the question, realized he was something special or something different or what. I didn't know he was a star, but you sure knew something was different and he was special. You just gravitated towards him, and he liked kids and everything. So, man, he'd play with you and mess with you and joke with you and stuff. And so from the very get-go, I don't know, my first memories maybe 3 years old, and he was just Then as you got a little bit older, then you knew, yeah, he was a singer and all that stuff. But when I was a kid, he'd already had his heyday. He wasn't number one, anymore and stuff. He was, always great. But he had those first few years, he was number one, him and Hank and stuff. And then Hank died, so it was heavy. I wasn't born at that time. So, none of my friends knew who he was. Little kids or anything, but and then as you got older, you just saw how great he always loved his singing and stuff. But he was just cool from the beginning to be around, even though you didn't know he was a star. No wonder he was so different anyway.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you saw him do a concert?
Yeah, the only time was at Cow Palace in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
It was amazing, and it's the first concert I ever went to.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it was a big package show with George Jones and a bunch of. So that was the first time I met George Jones. Did I ever tell you that? I didn't ever tell you that story, have I? George came backstage and all that stuff. That's a whole other story. But Lefty, yeah, it was the only time. And we had front row seats sitting there, and he comes up, and he starts singing. And it was just great. And what was wild was I was thinking to myself, man, he's got to be nervous with all these people out here. He's, because I only knew him in the living room and in the backyard and in a car, and so I never saw him on stage, though I knew he was a singer and all that and everything. But he came out there and he wasn't afraid at all. It wasn't like he was worried or afraid at all, and I was blown away at his confidence,
Yeah.
And of course he sang and everything. And what was wild was the one thing I remember was he was singing, and it might have been his left leg. It was like moving all around. He couldn't stop. It's like he couldn't. So he'd take his hand and he'd slap his leg, trying to make it stop. And I thought, what are you doing, man? I mean, come on. That's crazy. You can stop your leg if you want to. But he was acting like he couldn't, and he nearly beat his leg to death, like trying to make it stop jumping around. And the people went crazy, and I thought, this is nuts.
That's fantastic.
But he was great. Yeah.
Tell me, you guys have all got me calling him Sonny. Now, and folks that are listening, that was Lefty was known as Sonny to the family. How did he get that nickname?
Well, I was just as I was getting ready to talk to you on this interview, I was trying to remind myself, now, don't call him Sonny, because it just gets confusing, or you have to explain it. But, yeah, you're right. It's only been the last several years now that I can hardly even call him Lefty. It was always Sonny. So even in interviews now, I'll say Sonny, or I'll say Lefty, and I'll say Sonny, and then I lose people. There's who's? Oh, Sonny's Lefty. Well, all I know is that Grandpa called him son. Hey,
okay.
No, look, son. This not, and it kind of went to Sonny.
I got it. Okay. Well, I decided to kind of embrace that because everybody that I've talked to, they keep saying Sonny. I'm like, we might as well just go with that. We'll just explain it to everybody. So now you know.
Yeah, I'm good. Well, then I'm free to say Sonny on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, he has got me doing it now too. So we'll just go with that. Jimmy, tell me the story about the loaf of bread.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's funny you put it that way, the loaf of bread story. Maybe that's the way we should say it, the loaf of bread story, But, Lefty one time, years ago, this friend of his told me this story. It was a good friend of Lefty's. Road managed him for a while and stuff. And he said one day he had bought a bunch of cases of beer. This new gas station that just opened had beer real cheap. So he went down and got a bunch of beer. He calls Lefty and he says, man, I've got cases and cases of beer. I was going to bring you 2 or 3 cases of beer. Is anything you need? The store or anything? And Lefty said, yeah, bring over a loaf of bread. He said, oh, okay. So he got there, and the Lefty's driveway was steep and came way down into the garage there. And as he was walking down with these cases of beer and a loaf of bread sitting on top, he saw that Alice and Lefty was arguing, standing outside the car. Alice on the driver's side and Lefty was on the passenger side. They're kind of arguing over the top of the car, and the guy didn't want to get involved with that, but he thought with her back to him that he could set that beer and bread down in the garage there and get out unscathed, without getting involved with any of that. But and he did. He got past her, and he was just about to put the bread and the beer down, and Lefty called attention to him and said, hey, Walt, got one question for you. And Alice turns around. She sees him there with all this beer and this loaf of bread. And Lefty says, I just got one question. What are we going to do with all that bread? So it was a deal right there. And then, I'm sure it carried on after that.
I'm sure it did.
Alice wasn't in the mood for them to be doing any drinking. So I guess that whole deal was out the window at that point.
I love it.
Yeah.
Jimmy, tell me about the last time you saw Lefty. Do you remember?
Yeah. It was there at Grandma and Grandpa's. He was there in Tipton, California, in between Fresno and Bakersfield. And he was there about a week, at least 5 days, if not a week. And I went over and saw him pretty much every day,
Mm-hmm.
and had a great time with him. That was the time when we went to Merle's house and all that while he was in town. And that was the time when I went over there one day, and he had a copy of the TV guide. And I haven't seen a TV guide in a long time, but I don't know if they necessarily look like today. But back then they were kind of little and square, and there was the shiny, glossy 2 or 3 pages in front and 2 or 3 pages in back, and then it was just black and white, channels and stuff, TV shows. But in the back of it, there was a glossy page, and he had started writing on a song. And he says, check this out, Jimmy. It's a new song I'm writing. And it was a wishing room. And it was just beautiful lyrics. And I said, oh, yeah, that's great. And so then that was the last time I saw him. He came back to Nashville and ended up co-writing that with Whitey. This is actually a good question you could ask Whitey, because he had started it at Grandma's house, and then the next album, his last album, it was on the album, I was like, oh, that's that song that Sonny had on the TV guide that he had started. And I thought back then, wow, I wish I would have been smart enough to say, hey, Sonny, can I write these lyrics down on another piece of paper for you and keep this TV guide?
Yeah.
Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, that's for sure. That'd be cool to have. That's a great song too.
That would have been cool to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting a wishing room, beautiful song.
It sure is. Well, Jimmy, you and I have talked about this before, and I had mentioned that you and David and Alan each have a little bit of Lefty's sound in your voices, but each of you has something a little different. But it all I think if you put it all together, you'd have Lefty, and of course, I mean, the genetics of it, and of course, being around the family, it's going to come out naturally. But you have just such an amazing voice, and my listeners know, because I play your music all the time on my show, and
appreciate it, man.
I love your music, and I want to let people know that you can get a hold of Jimmy Clay on his Facebook page if you'd like to order his album. I highly recommend it. You've heard a lot of the songs on my show, and or you can contact Jimmy. You've got an address, and that they can just go ahead and send you a money order if they just want to order it that way too, right?
Yeah. It's 607 Transit Avenue, Transit TRANSIT, Transit Avenue, Columbia, Tennessee. Zip code 38401.
All right. We'll be sure to put that information on our Facebook page too, and we'll share your Facebook page there too. But folks, you can message Jimmy directly on there. I know you're on Facebook and you respond to people pretty quickly. So highly encourage you to pick up this album. And I was blessed that Jimmy sent me a couple new songs that he has recorded and is getting ready to do another album here real soon, and it's going to be a fantastic continuation of what you've already done. And the song that I really love is "Don't Mention Bakersfield." Man, that's a great song.
Oh man, isn't that something? That is I love the melody on that thing.
Yeah, it's
and also, before I forget, I was going to say, I always forget, but also if they'd like for me to sign the CD, I will sign the CD on a request if they want me to. Also, if they order a CD,
okay,
just something.
Make sure you include that information. And how much do they need to send you? I forgot to ask about that too. That might be important.
Pardon?
How much do they need to send you? That might be important information.
It's $15 plus $4.95 for shipping and handling.
All right, there you go. We'll put that on our page, and it's self-titled Jimmy Clay Frizzell. Well, again, folks, please pick up Jimmy's album. It's fantastic stuff. And Jimmy, thank you for being on the show and sharing some of your memories of Lefty, and especially for sharing your music with us. And I certainly always enjoy talking with you, and I'm real proud to have you part of this great tribute to Lefty here tonight.
Well, I appreciate it, Scott, and he's my favorite as well, so everybody, I'm sure, is going to enjoy this show, especially if they're a Lefty fan at all, because he is, and always will be the best anyway.
Absolutely. Hey, everybody, Scott Weichel, you're listening to my